All right. Well, good morning. I'm Blaine Rodgers, and I'm here today with Maverick Squires, and we're going to kind of go over some of the things that we can, help prepare in terms of our management and some of the things that you might come across as we start looking at bringing home our summer pig projects for the state fairs and some of the different shows across the country and county fairs. And so, obviously, we're happy to have Maverick here. He brings a wealth of knowledge on the show pig side of things and as well as all the species. And we just wanted to get Maverick on here this morning and ask him a few questions, maybe as some of you start bringing your projects home that might help you with some of the transitional phase, as well as how to kind of start working towards your summer goals and being successful. So Maverick, a few things as we start into this. Obviously, we're getting ready to start purchasing livestock, or some people probably have them already purchased for their county and state fairs and maybe the expo or some of those summer events that way. Obviously the weather's a huge ordeal right now, and some of the things that are going on, and the nature of a pig project and how finicky they can kind of be at times and trying to keep them healthy. Can you kind of give us a little bit of insight on what some of the things that you do to keep pigs healthy and on track and eating, and especially as you bring them home, introducing them to new environments and maybe commingling genetics from different places and environments, trying to get them on track and rolling. Maybe shed some insight on what you guys do that way to keep them on track.
You bet, Blaine. Um, you know, when we buy them from somebody else, or if we're buying from a few different people, I feel like it helps to maybe get some insight from them too before we go into the actual transition of it, kind of blind. Meaning, inquiring what their expectation for us is to set that animal up health wise. What vaccine we need to continue on with, or do we need to revac when we get home? Those type of questions, and where they're at from a parasite standpoint. Do we need to white worm them when we drop them off and unload? Some of those types of things, and also feed inclusion on where we need to be at when we get home. I like to send my customers home with some of my feed if they don't have access to the feed that I get feed from, or if they don't have access to my mill where I get feed at, just to try to encourage that transition phase maybe goes a little easier and smoother. And then too, kind of relying on them to tell you a little bit about maybe the medication side, if they've got those pigs on a starter that's got CTC or Linko or whatever it is, and ask them, what we need to do from our side of it, getting those animals onto the right feed or medication in the feed, whatever it is, just so those animals won't slip, getting them in. And then actual things that need done day to day. This goes along with what we do, but I really like to make sure before we leave and have our facility kind of ready and clean, to have something in the medicator, whether that's liquid boost or hydro boost, just to encourage some intake from a water standpoint. It seems to me like whether I'm weaning pigs or selling pigs or going to a new facility or a new home with a new customer pig, if those animals are drinking well, especially pigs, and research tells us that if they're drinking, that we should have good feed intake. So with that, I really like to have hydro boost running in the medicator when we get animals in. And then we talked about it a little bit ago, but nutrition for that animal, finding something that's a high quality feed that they'll eat. I feel like that's maybe even one of the more important things when you get them home, is just to make sure that animal keeps rolling from a feed and nutrition standpoint. On a good feed. I think a lot of guys bring these things in now and they want to start managing them and slowing them down or whatever. And whether that's right or wrong, I think it's important just to make sure for a little bit, we get the animals started. And I think the reason that's important, it goes back to that health deal. If we can keep them on feed and keep them going, um, you know, animals that are eating tend to not get sick as much as those ones that don't. Um, so that's kind of the things that I worry about when we're trying to help a customer get started with that animal. And then, um, you know, I feel like this is a hard time of year right now. Like, we had some 80-degree days a few days ago, and last night it was back to 32. So, you know, if I leave today and we go run our route or whatever, and it gets warm again, well, the heater's on at home before I left, so the barn's stuffy. And this time of year, there's just a lot of fluctuation, and it's hard to manage that temperature in your building and fresh air and humidity unless you're set up really well, and some people are. But I'd say for the most part, trying to think about managing that climate each day before you plan your day or whatever, and how you're going to make sure that animal's in a good, high quality air, fresh air environment each day, um, would be another thing in transitioning those pigs this time of year, just because the temperature is not constant at all. That'd be
Yeah,
some of the things, Blaine.
yeah, that sounds great. One of the things that I know a lot of people I've talked with, and even ourselves here with my kids, showing a few pigs here and there. You know, it seems like one of the bigger challenges now is, you know, with all the regulations on medications and feed, you know, medication, we've had a bigger challenge, especially in these transition periods when we bring them home. Obviously, you know, somebody in your situation that has a lot of livestock on feed can have your own feed milled and work with a veterinarian to, you know, make sure that you have the proper medications for preventative aspects and measures. You know, in a situation for a lot of these guys that have smaller numbers, that's maybe not feasible or not available. And even if you do all those things right, have your barn right, biosecurity right, you know, temperature control and feed or, you know, medications, feed through medications. I mean, I don't think there's any way that you can ever, it's inevitable to have a clean bill of health all the time in a pig barn, it feels like. So, you know, assuming that you've done all those things and you've done the best you can in terms of managing those, you know, and they go off feed or they get sick, obviously we can doctor them with antibiotics or whatever. But what are some of the things that once you've kind of gone through some of those situations, or, you know, I know a big challenge is just keeping stools right and things of that nature. You know, even if the animal appears to be healthy from a respiratory standpoint, you know, keeping the stool right and keeping them, you know, their gut healthy and all those kind of things. Say you do hit a hiccup and something runs through your barn, what are some of the measures or practices that you like to do to try to kind of get them back and rolling again, back on feed aggressive and getting everything in check?
Sure, Blaine, that's a good question. And I'm going to pass it back to you too. So for us, I feel like if we can have access to our products, getting Amifirm in those animals, whether it's through a gel form or hopefully they're already on Extreme or some sort of supplementation that's got a prebiotic and maybe some probiotic also in those animals stomach wise. And, you know, from there, um, I've always been one that doesn't mind to let those animals be either and have another facility where, um, I say another facility, but an opportunity for those animals to get some dirt and just kind of be. And if we have to reset, maybe try and do that. But um, specifically, um, that's kind of what we would do. I don't know that we've got the best regimen once we're to that point when all things have kind of came off the bus and we've got a really sick barn, and we've already done all the things we've talked about um, on restarting. That's something I need to continue to sharpen my game on. So what's your thoughts on that, Blaine?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's constantly evolving, and as different bugs kind of run through barns, there's different things. I think they're always uh, become more effective, and that's why I was just kind of picking your brain. I think, for our experience, the gel, the VitaCharge gel has been something good to jumpstart them. I know you talked about Liquid Boost earlier. I mean, I think those products all help, and you were talking about the Amifirm side of things or prebiotic. I think those are all great tools or whatever. But I mean, like you say, I mean, you can do everything right, and sometimes it just seems like you're beating your head
Yeah.
against the wall this time of year trying to keep things healthy. And
Yes.
it's one thing when you're going to a jackpot show or shows and you bring something home. I think the most frustrating thing for me and people I've talked to is, you can be doing everything right. You can have animals that have been there for a while and commingled and on an incline in terms of their health and go in the right direction. And then just something all of a sudden one day you walk in there and they're all, maybe off a little bit, and it's hard to put your thumb
Yeah.
on some of that stuff. So I think that's been one of the things
Yes.
that I think in working with people and having conversations with them can be the biggest challenge of the pig portion as well as other species. But just in the initial phases, keeping them healthy, keeping them on feed, and just getting things off on the right foot to start and get them rolling. So appreciate your insight
Yeah.
on that. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And it not to interrupt you, but I feel like, talking about this year with uh with PED and fighting some of those challenges, and not to limit what we do anymore, but um I feel like, having a goal for a show is maybe as important as it ever has been because of what you said. We're not showing a species anymore that um, will allow you to just roll every single weekend without any consequence, health wise. And, that's been something that this year I feel like we had to really sit down and say, okay, do we want to go to our district and have the opportunity to be exposed to PD, or do we want to lay up and just focus on OIE and try to get through it? And in saying that, I think if you have a goal in mind about where you want to go and limiting your risk at certain times is maybe a good thing. I'm not saying we need to quit showing, but I just think it's something to keep in mind, as we go to the barn or we go to an early jackpot or whatever, just to try to think about if we can help maybe not get our state fair pigs sick, and we're showing our expos or whatever, the better we can be just in terms of common sense animal husbandry people to try to keep them other things healthy. um, I think the better off we'll be. But
yeah, I think that's great advice. Thanks, Maverick. One of the things that is always kind of a conversation, especially this time of year, as we're starting to break into training them and getting them ready to show. What are some of your philosophies in terms of when you start exercising the pigs, getting them out of their pen, kind of getting them whip broke and show broke, and what are some of the things that you do from that regard? How much is too much? How much isn't enough? Maybe just run us through some of your thoughts on exercising them and getting them out.
sure, Blaine. I think, in the beginning, it's good, like in this transition phase, maybe let them get acclimated for a few days for sure. And I encourage our kids to jump in there with them and try to get them calmed down, and just letting them get comfortable with the kid, and just really kind of a bonding time where that animal will just settle in. And once we get them through that, maybe then think about getting them out. I like to maybe reduce their stress load at first, by just kind of letting them be for a little bit. And then, once you've been there until that animal's calmed down somewhat in the pen, I don't think there's anything bad about getting them broke early. Um, I feel like it's kind of good to do that. There are some every once in a while that you don't have good luck with. And I think it's good to put them up and leave them alone and let them kind of reset and give them a break. And maybe the next time you go back, try to do things a little different, try to put them into a new environment, um, and maybe try to get that animal out of its old habits, try to eliminate that opportunity to fail again by putting him into something new. But I think if you start early, there's some of those that you've had, just like I have, that you're like, man, I'm never going to get this thing broke. And I think if you kind of figure them out at a younger time in life, you can begin working on that, and kind of identify who your problem child is in there, and put a plan together to get that done. But how much every day, I think, is dependent a lot on the animal. You know, I think a lot of them, just a safe rule of thumb, I think in the beginning's 10 minutes, some are 15 minutes. And then when you get down to the end, depending on the demands of your show, I think it can be a little more or a little less. If you're going to a small jackpot, or a small county fair or whatever, where you're not going to have to show for an hour. I don't think you've got to walk that hog for an hour leading up to the show, but I think sure 30 minutes is probably safe. And I like walking them every day when we're getting to that point. Um, Not that you have to, but I just feel better about it when we're asking so much of those animals, and we're pushing them so hard. I kind of like them to know their body, because I feel like there's some of those we've pushed on before for a week, and their back's doubled in size and they're twice as wide, and they get out there and they just have all kinds of muscle spasms and can't handle it. So I kind of feel like making sure they're tracking the way you want them to, and those types of things is um, something good to have. But I also don't think, or I also think that it's okay to rest those animals too, if you see the need or feel the need to. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I don't think they got to be walked every day, but I do feel like they need to be treated like an athlete to some degree.
Sounds good.
What do you think on that, Blaine? I mean, with
I'm
your
just here.
kids.
So I think you drilled it. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff, no matter what species we talk about or what form of management, I think a little bit just, requires you to use some common sense and understand it's no different if we're talking about our kids at home or whatever, or the people we work with at work or whatever. I mean, sometimes livestock are having good days and sometimes they aren't, and understanding when it's, becoming something that's advantageous or helping them versus something that's detrimental is kind of important. And understanding your environment and situation and being able to read that, I think, is probably one of the keys in any management that you're doing to be successful. And so, if an animal, if you get them out and they don't seem like they're feeling good that day, it's probably counterproductive to keep working them and challenging them harder. And so I think a lot of obviously what you said is valuable information. And I think just coupling that with being, aware of what's happening as you're working with those livestock, if you're getting to a point where they're fighting you nonstop and it's going the wrong direction, it's probably a good time to find a positive point to stop and regroup another time versus I think a lot of times they get barn sour too. You've been working them a lot, and sometimes you can push it to the point where you've over prepared and they start getting sour towards it, and you feel like the wheels are coming off the bus, and you get to a show and they're on point because they're in a new environment and things are different. So I think just reading the situation and not causing any damaging effects from trying to overdo things sometimes is critical too. But
I'm really glad you shared that too. I thought about that when I read that yesterday. I'm really glad you talked about that, because I think in the beginning a lot of kids have this expectation that it needs to come off great and they need to be show broke and they need to be perfect and all these things. And I'm really glad you said that, because you're exactly right. it's completely fine to just take it slow and do exactly what the animal can kind of get done that day and be satisfied with it. I'm really glad you shared that.
Well, one of the things that I think I continually, I mean, Maverick, you go to shows all the time, and I tend to be at a lot of them too. And I think one of the things that constantly is a reminder to me every time I go, just coming off the Oklahoma Youth Expo and going, one of the things that just blows my mind every time I go is you can feel like you've prepared to the 12th degree at home and got everything in check and feel like you might have the very best one that you've ever taken to town. And you get there and man, it can be humbling real quick at how good everybody has got. It doesn't matter if you're at your local county fair district show or the Oklahoma Youth Expo, it just seems like the level of competition has increased and the knowledge and the people that are involved in this industry, between all the different ways that we can communicate knowledge. I mean, it's incredible how good people have gotten at showing livestock. And so,
Yeah.
With that, I'm always trying to challenge myself for the people that I work with or my family or whoever it is, how do you get that competitive edge? What do you have to do next to be in a field where there's not very much separation in the elite? I watched that gilt show there we were talking about earlier at OIE, and man, it just seems like, we all hold everything to such a high standard and we tend to, find issues with livestock or whatever. But when you just sit back and you don't have a dog in the fight and you can watch a livestock show anymore, it is incredible how good you have to be to separate yourself from the ones that are already good and be elite to win a show. So my question for you is, as we talk about that and preparing, no matter what level you're at, I think as we get to these county fairs, or a state show or whatever, first impression has become vital. I mean, if you walk an animal in the ring and for that split second, there's something about it that just, whether it's how it's driven or how it looks or whatever prepared, that doesn't catch that judge's eye, you've got a split second to make a first impression, just like we do with anything in life. And I think you can bring some great perspective because I know you judge a lot of shows and manage livestock for them. As we talk about getting these pigs ready for whether it's jackpot or their endpoint this summer, what are some of the things that you do just for that first impression as we talk about skin and hair or, showing them or presenting them? What are some of the things that you do to make sure that when they hit that ring for that first split second, no matter how good they are, they get a first impression that really hits them hard?
That's a good question, Blaine. That's a really good question. And I think, even though there is a lot to that, obviously your guys' time of year is maybe even more imperative than ours because you have the availability of sunshine and kids are out of school. But tanning is obviously anymore something that is just imperative if you want to be successful at a show. And I shouldn't say tanning, but making sure that animal's as dark as he can be if he's belted, and even if he's white, trying to do your part and setting that animal apart, whether that's through growing the most leg hair you can and having them look as burly as possible, even if they are a white one, or having a belted one that you've really worked hard on to get as dark as you possibly can. And you're right. When you have one like that, that's just jet black and is just dialed into a T. That not only is awesome as a judge to see, because you understand what kind of time it takes to make them look like that, and they look good, but also I think within that, talking about those kids that are showing them, we had this conversation with a boy who made the sale at OIU with his gilt. When he shows, he does a really good job showing, but there's times where he's not confident in the animal that he has, from a body language perspective. He's not overly confident in the ring with kind of with how he shows and how he stands and how he looks. And I think at OIE, that's or at the kind of levels we're talking about are is something that's imperative, to not only have an awesome animal, but be confident in that animal as a showman, because as a show judge, I want that kid to know how good his animal is. I want him to be, or her to be, excited about that animal. And to be honest, I'm not so sure there aren't some judges that need a little reassurance that that pig is as good as what it looks to him, and that they've been in that position before and at that kind of level before. And I mean that as nice as possible, but when the going gets tough, I really think that psychology can come through a judge's mind. And it's good that those kids are putting themselves in every situation they can to succeed because of those things you talked about. Every little thing we can do to help anymore is a big thing. And unfortunately, that is how tough it's gotten. But I think back to your original question about the skin and hair thing too. It's undebatable now. I felt like before you could kind of still get a pale belted one through there or whatever if the kid did pretty good showing, but now it just seems like everybody's catching on. And in our country, or in the South, it seems like people are going to go ahead and spend the money to buy a tanning bed if they can, or a tanning bulb of some kind. And that's something that I wanted to bring up on this, because I think a lot of people don't understand that there's access to those. I do realize some people can't afford them, but for those that listen to this, there are people who sell those. There's people who make them. You can buy a used tanning bed, whatever. But for these summer hogs, I guess you don't need one, if you don't mind getting out there and working a little bit to do that. And I was going to ask you, Blaine, I had referenced my notes back when I worked for some guys in the summertime, but when you guys tan in the summer, do you ever put oil on those hogs at all? Or do you just rinse them with water and let them take in some sunlight and put them up?
I think that's a great question, something that we debate all the time here at home. And I think that it's something that there again, you got to manage every situation very carefully. And if you do use oil in those situations, you got to be very careful about, some sunblock or whatever on white parts, or making sure you don't get oil there. Or one of the things that we've had just a little bit of trouble with when we use oil is sometimes the staff and breaking. Sometimes for whatever reason, it feels like when you put oil on them and put them out in the sun, sometimes that's when we see some of the staff, break on their backs and stuff a little bit more frequently. So, I think that we have a huge advantage in the summertime showing those, because you can just go ahead and expose them just when you're exercising and stuff to a lot of those opportunities to hit sunlight. And then you don't have to maybe worry about it quite as much as maybe you guys all have to do, at certain parts of the year. So I think that's probably an advantage. One thing I just want to go back to your point. I think you made an incredible point. We talk about preparing our livestock and making sure that everything's on point there. And sometimes we do forget about the exhibitor or the showman. And I think that your point was incredible, and something that we don't talk about near enough. No different than a job interview. You can have two candidates come in that are both equal in terms of their qualifications, and one can exude confidence and one cannot, and it makes all the difference in the world and how you perceive that. And I mean, preparing like you've been there before, I think is a huge thing, and the way that you talked about those exhibitors coming in the ring and exuding confidence and giving, and I agree with you. It's not necessarily that a judge isn't qualified, but when they're making a split-second decision, we all get to look at these livestock the duration of their life to make an assumption or understand what's good or bad about them. These guys have a split-second reaction to decide whether that one's good or bad. And when somebody comes in there in the ring and they've got their stock on point and they look like they're there to win, I mean, that confidence exudes a lot of, relays over into their decision-making process. And I think that's a great point that you made there.
Sure. It's something too that's fun. I think as a judge, when you get to be in that position, when you have one that's that good, and you're just out there with the kids and stuff. So I think it's kind of a neat thing when the kid gets to experience that also. But I don't think we talk about it very much, and I'm kind of glad you brought it up too. So, yeah.
Maverick, I appreciate it. Your insight on a lot of this stuff. I know we could talk for hours on philosophies and management styles, and there's not always a right or wrong way to do things. There's so many different ways that you can implement things. And I think one of the things that sometimes we do is we try to collect all this knowledge and try a million different things. And sometimes, creating a program that works for you and your specific barn. And I mean, you can take 3 or 4 of the most successful families or coaching mentors or whatever across the country, and I'll ask them the same thing, and they'll all have different management styles to prepare to be the most successful on the highest level. So I think one of the things that we do sometimes as we get into this is we survey the crowd on everything and try to implement everybody's ideas. And what you really think one of the things that makes you the most successful is when you can figure out what works for you and create a program and not deviate from it. And so I think you've brought a lot of insight that can sure help somebody as they prepare this summer, and hopefully they can kind of implement some of those things and stick to them. Before we close, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to elaborate on or bring up that you think would be some advice that might really help somebody be successful this summer?
Blaine, and Lori may have mentioned it earlier, but I would just reiterate, trying to manage those animals from a temperature standpoint. It seems like it's always the battle, and remembering that fresh, cool water and keeping those animals fed when it's cool out, and just the basic principles that you mentioned again, and just doing those things that are really the easy things, just trying to do them well. And thanks for letting me be on the call today. I enjoyed visiting with you too.
Yeah, thanks, man.